chain senior officer. All of them, they were chairman of a session at the Palermo conference. This is the third world dialogue, and I would like really to give a warm welcome to Artur. Sorry, I cannot pronounce your surname very properly, that is a consultant that was hired by UPM just to support this, as a facilitator, this dialogue among of us. As you saw, I wanted to clear the floor. The reason why we have used this image was not to discuss any graphic representation, but was just to highlight filling the gap between SCP, sustainable consumption, and sustainable production, as one of the relevant parts in approaching a sustainable food system conceptual framework, context-specific for the Mediterranean. So we are really trying to continue our dialogue in order to be able then to assess the impact of what we are proposing, like in this case, what can be concrete action to bring on the ground knowledge or scientific evidence knowledge onto the ground. To do that, we felt that on the third, we could have this multi-perspective perspective, and please, there are few rules. Everybody that wanted to speak after that, the facilitator Artur will introduce the floor. After that, the co-chair, the four keynote speaker, will frame from their different perspective this dialogue. If you wanted to speak, please don't speak more than 3 minutes. The maximum time in order then we can continue to switch. I would like to briefly highlight the presence of Pasquale Steduto, that was con Nicola La Maddalena co-chair of the session of water scarcity, land degradation, climate change at Palermo conference, that has moved to ICARDA, but behind the affiliation of us are expert on that field. Then there is, follow the screen, you know, already presented Jorge, Baourakis, Roberto, Capone, and Giuseppe Provenzano, and Florence Tartanac. There is Mauro Capone, CNR, National Research Council, that had a presentation in the session on innovation on bioeconomy. There is also Aida Turini and Angela Polito, the CREA, there are no image, and there is a fantastic Barbara Burlingame, that was a co-chair of the session Sustainable Diet in the context of the sustainable food system. There is also the close friend, Elliot Berry, with whom we have run for so many years the approach of sustainable diet, specifically Mediterranean diet, in the session 17 that he co-chaired with Roberto Capone. So I would like to pass the floor to Roberto Capone as a host of CIHEAM-Bari that is organizing this series of a web conference. Roberto, you have the floor. Thank you.
Morning everybody. My contribution is focused on Mediterranean diet as a lever for bridging consumption and production in a sustainable and healthy way in the Mediterranean region in the context of the improvement of the sustainability of Mediterranean food systems. In general, the development of a sustainable food system poses a global challenge that could contribute to improve the development of the poorest rural populations, the most innovative food supply chains based on sustainable production, integration and equity between the various actors in the food supply chain, the promotion of sustainable actors in the promotion of sustainable diets, and the progressive integration between agriculture and environmental policies. Another contribution to the transition towards a sustainable production and consumption is represented by sustainable diets. The promotion of such diets, focusing on agrobiodiversity as a key factor, is an important step to fill the gap between sustainable food consumption and production. The sustainability of food systems is an important prerequisite for achieving not only food and nutrition security, but also social, economic, and environmental sustainability of the Mediterranean area. Unfortunately, the unsustainability of the food systems in the Mediterranean also contribute to the erosion of the cultural food heritage of the region, which represents the real reason why the Mediterranean diet was inscribed in 2010 in the representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity of UNESCO. As you know, this pattern of nutrition is not only a way of eating, but the expression of an entire cultural system marked by healthiness, food quality, and territorial specificity. However, it is considered in a very simplistic way a healthy diet. In recent years, it has been recognized for having a lower environmental impact than other diets, but as a result of its approach based on frugality and sobriety, and because it uses few animal products. The Mediterranean diet is linked to the territories it promotes directly and indirectly through tourism, other specific economic craft activities, thus contributing to rural, economic, and social development. Through these peculiarities, it directly could fill the gap between sustainable food consumption and production, and can concretely contribute to the implementation of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as a tangible roadmap towards sustainable food systems. I remember you that the promotion of a Mediterranean diet is also the fourth thematic priority in the CIHEAM 2025 agenda. But why have we chosen the Mediterranean diet? First of all, because in 2001, during the second informal meeting in Athens, the agriculture ministers of our member countries asked the two CIHEAM to promote the cultural and the food pattern as a tool for development of marginal areas in the Mediterranean countries. And after, because it is expression of Mediterranean cultures and traditions, because it is an authentic diet followed in Mediterranean rural areas for more than 60 years, it is therefore an authentic historic diet. Because shared by Mediterranean people with specific local variations, influences the current Mediterranean diets, because it is the scientific publication recognized its positive impact on nutrition and health, but also on environment, economy, and culture. International interest, even outside the Mediterranean area, and sober food consumption pattern that contributes to reducing food waste. For all these reasons, since 2011, CIHEAM and FEO, in collaboration with other national and international institutions, have started a cooperation program on the sustainability of food production and consumption, with a focus on the sustainability of food systems and diets in the Mediterranean area, using Mediterranean diet as a case study. As a result of the work carried out and the knowledge acquired, attention was shifted to a Mediterranean diet pattern intended not only as a health diet, but above all, as a sustainable diet that reduces the impact on the overall ecosystem by raising social, cultural, and economic awareness. This approach is based on 4 aspects of sustainability: reduced environmental impact and richness in biodiversity, proven benefits on health and nutrition, high sociocultural value, positive economic return on the community. Therefore, we consider the Mediterranean diet as a lever to strengthen the sustainability of production and consumption patterns in the Mediterranean area. Based on seasonal, typical, and local products and shared by the actors of the food chain, it allows to establish and strengthen the links between production and consumption. Promoting the Mediterranean diet based on the concept of frugality and sobriety contributes to the reduction of food waste, especially in the households. I conclude by saying that, in my opinion, it is very important to implement the voluntary guidelines for the sustainability of a Mediterranean diet in the Mediterranean region that can be strategically foreseen as a multi-stakeholder framework to link sustainable consumption and production towards the improvement of sustainability of Mediterranean food systems for coping through a systemic, holistic approach, multiple current challenges facing Mediterranean countries. Thank you for your attention.
Do you want please to take the floor?
Yeah, can I say 2 words? Who is next?
I think that Artur have to manage this passing the floor for each. Okay, please, Artur.
Yes.
You are the facilitator, so please.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, and apologies for the pause. And I would like to thank very much for your, Mr. Capone, for your intervention and interesting insights into the Mediterranean diet as a lever. And with that, I would like to pass the floor to Mr. Jorge Baourakis, who represents CIHEAM-Chania. Is George with us today?
Yes, yes.
Yes. Very well then. George, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Buonasera to everybody. Thank you for meeting you all, and Artur, who only talked on the phone the other day. Thank you for the valuable information. Let me say some things. I was very proud and very happy to be at the Palermo conference, which was a worldwide event of great importance. And I would like to say that according to our presentation during that meeting, MAIH, the CIHEAM-MAIH, were a sister brother institute of Bari and very well connected and cooperating with Bari as well on this particular topic. We have a special contribution with respect to the link to the filling the gap between sustainable production and sustainable consumption in the food systems chain. What we're doing in the past years, we are doing an extensive research over the past years. We have an agro-tourism observatory. Agro-tourism observatory, what we're doing, we're interviewing the visitors of Crete when they depart, after they have been here, after they have stayed here for a week, 10 days, for 2 weeks as well. So we split somehow the target market, North American market, a South Mediterranean market, Central European market, Northern European market, Australian market, and so on. We have this opportunity because we have a lot of Erasmus students. So when we have a Spanish visitor, the interview is conducted in Spanish, with Italians in italics, with Finnish in Finnish, Norway, Norwegian, and so on. So this is a great opportunity, and we make sure that we don't miss any particular element of that particular interview. So with that interview, a large part of the questions has to do with the Mediterranean diet, food production sustainability, and consumers' perceptions, attitudes, and preferences with respect to Mediterranean diet. On the main Mediterranean, on the basic Mediterranean high-quality food products, such as olive oil, wine, citrus, greenhouse vegetables, dairy products, and so on. So I think, as I saw as well, when we present that in Palermo, it was very well received and very well accepted, and we may contribute to that in any respect that we might consider it necessary. On top of that, I would like to say that our institute, we were coordinating for 2 years. There is a 7-country Mediterranean project under UNESCO, where Italy is part of it, Portugal is part of it, Spain, Croatia, Cyprus, and Morocco. I don't know if I have forgotten anybody. So for 2 years, we were coordinating this particular project with several meetings, with the sites, publications, and so on. So before I proceed, I would like to present you Ms. Eleni Stamataki. Ms. Eleni Stamataki is on behalf of CIHEAM, the key person for sustainable agriculture. As Roberto mentioned, for CIHEAM is a 4th pillar, is a very particular, significant point for us. So Eleni perceives this particular concept from the socioeconomic point of view. Eleni.
Hello, everybody. So this is Eleni speaking. I'm working in the Business Economics and Management Department. And on top of what the director mentioned, as far as the Mediterranean diet and the sustainable agriculture concept is concerned, I would just like to mention that we also participate in a few projects. A few of them are financed by the Green Fund here at Greece. Those projects are mainly concentrate on the production of specific local products like chestnuts and aromatic plants and herbs. And we're trying to find ways to somehow secure the sustainability of the production and the creation of short food chains, so that we try actually to facilitate the trade and the marketing of those products in the local markets and the hotels, and take advantage of the the large tourist market that and the visitors that come here during the summertime. And we also would welcome any other initiative related to that aspect. So we certainly consider as a great challenge the relation between Mediterranean diet and the sustainable agriculture issues.
And if I'm allowed as well, on several international projects that we have with Indonesia, with Russia, Ukraine, and so on, and the Balkan countries, we're trying to promote this particular concept of Mediterranean product sustainability in production system and consumption as well.
Well, thank you very much, George and Eleni, for your valuable contribution and telling us about your innovative approach toward the research and taking advantage of the high level of tourism inflow to Chania, to Crete, so that you could actually witness and assess the perception and attitude of foreign market representatives towards our Mediterranean basic products. Very interesting, and this is something very specific that we are actually looking for in order to list and concentrate upon, perhaps scale up. So this will be dedicated, the discussion will be dedicated in the second part of the e-dialogue. Well, thank you very much. And with that, I would like to pass the floor to Giuseppe Provenzano from UfM Secretariat. Giuseppe, please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Artur, and thank you everybody for being at this meeting. It's actually, it seems very interesting since the first words I have to say. I am here with both hats, both as the UfM Secretariat, which is working very closely with the FAO and CIHEAM in order to advance this platform, but also as a facilitator and moderator during the Palermo conference, more specifically on the sessions working on migrations from the point of view of research and solution, and also on research and innovation. Going to the topic of this specific web dialogue, which seems to me to be very much balanced in the approach as we've been following to the concept note. Well, I have to say that first of all that filling the gap between sustainable consumption and production requires tools for rethinking our approach to sustainable food system, basically, and the approach of the public to it, as consumers, but also as the producers. So it means bridging this gap through different tools that can come both from public awareness, which is educating, between brackets, the public, also through skills and through research. This meeting, allow me to say, first of all, is coming at a highly relevant timing, because in the Mediterranean agenda, we are seeing different initiatives and meeting points where the dialogue is going to advance from different perspectives. Next year, first of all, we are going to have some ministerial meetings of the Union for the Mediterranean. First of all, we are going to have a meeting on the blue economy, which is connected very closely to the Mediterranean diet from the point of view of fish production, for instance, but not only, and also from the environmental and climate change point of view, which of course relates to the sustainable consumption and production perspective. But also, we are going to host here at the UfM at the end of this month, on the 25th, the annual meeting between representatives for research from the 43 countries of the Union for the Mediterranean, a dialogue managed by the European Commission, where we are going to discuss the different initiatives which are connected very closely to the Mediterranean diet. For this, I mean essentially PRIMA, BlueMed, and in deep roots of migration. So how can we try to bridge this divide, to fill this gap? First of all, from the point of view of education on SCP, we have to promote education at all levels. So not only focusing on what's existing or adding curriculum at university, which is absolutely crucial, but also by doing educational activities at the level of general public. This is why we have been supporting as UfM a publication on education for sustainable consumption, behavior, and lifestyles, which is a collection of case studies coming from all the Mediterranean on the different practices, training initiatives, and activities on the ground. Then, from the point of view of skills and research, I feel like I'm actually among stakeholders with a very similar perspective on this, because I think we can all agree that we need to have more trainings and more research in topics related to sustainable consumption and production in food system, which in the context of the Mediterranean then can be translated also to the Mediterranean diet. we have to be aware of the threats that the sustainable food system faces in the Mediterranean, especially from the point of view of which challenges do we expect in the next years, and which should be addressed more closely by research and innovation, by skills, by training. First of all, we cannot ignore that there are environmental threats. I'm thinking about climate change. We have recently supported the publication of our first report by a group of researchers working on assessing the impact of climate change in the Mediterranean from the regional perspective, which is called the MEDEC, and which have brought to us many serious outcomes of the research, which showed that agriculture, fisheries, and all parts related to food production are going to be seriously affected if we consider that the Mediterranean is a hotspot for climate change. We are going to experience a rise in water. We're going to experience a rise in temperatures, but also from the environmental side, we're going to experience desertification in the Mediterranean. So those are all possible challenges that we need to keep into consideration for making more resilient our food systems. Then we have also to consider what are social challenges. With CIHEAM and with FAO, we already worked in the past for assessing what is the impact the migration is going to have on rural areas. Because if we are going to experience flows of people going from the countryside, moving to the big cities, this is going also to put in question our ability to have a sustainable food system in the future. And if we're going to have enough people on the ground actually working on where food systems are actually located from the point of view of production. And then, of course, there are economic challenges because we have to ensure that production and consume go hand in hand in order to ensure a decent work for everybody. And how can we try to work more for making this more sustainable? As I mentioned, first of all, the SDGs, the agenda of the UN for 2030, it's our big, let's say, road sign. We all try to follow as organizations. All our institutions present here today are part of this agenda. As the UfM, we try always to work closely for being a promoter of the SDG in the Euro-Mediterranean region. Then we have, of course, the issue of skills, which mean that if we want the young people to work more closely in these fields, they should be receiving the appropriate training and competencies that they need in order to work in this field and to earn a decent living wage. And then we have, of course, research and innovation. Why research and innovation? Because if we want to make more sustainable, more circular our systems, we need, first of all, to push the loop between the cycles of production and consumption. And we need to make our food systems more resilient in this changing and shifting landscape. For this, I think that one specific trait that I would like to highlight for concluding is that there is still not enough connection between the training institution, the public research centers from one side, and the other is the reality of the job markets in the rural areas, in the coastal communities, and in the Mediterranean at large. I would like to briefly present a couple of takeaway points that this regard have been presented by a meeting that we've been having on the 1st of April, where we invited CIHEAM to be our organizing partner together with other institutions, which is a side event to the UfM Ministerial Declaration on Employment and Labor. The side event was called Employment of Mediterranean University Graduates, Bridging the Employability Gap between Advanced Skill and Market, which I feel is highly relevant to the topic of this web dialogue. First of all, all the institutions, the stakeholders, the researchers, the students, the start-uppers that were present agreed that not enough efforts being presented on this topic, so they advise to use the blue economy, bioeconomy, and circular economy as triggers for economic growth, employment opportunities, and new kinds of jobs for applied research, training, mobility, and awareness raising in innovative domains, creating sustainable development. They advise to work more in facilitating knowledge transfer from research to business in the Mediterranean region, and to close the gap between university research world from one side, the job market and entrepreneurship, and the need of territories. By territories, we essentially meant rural areas and coastal communities. And finally, to work harder to offer to young graduates new competencies and means for transitioning as best as possible to the work environment, characterized by its openness to innovation and mobility and its fast pace of changing, which sometimes can outpace the world of education. So for the moment, it will be all from my side. Thank you.
Giuseppe, thank you very much for your very interesting intervention, which basically underlines the need for proper research, because this is something which is still missing in many domains related to sustainable consumption and production, and their interlinkages, and how consumption could influence production. Research is definitely missing. Capacity building through training, education, and these are topics of the utmost importance, I believe. So thank you very much once again. And with that, I would like to pass the floor to Florence Tartanac from FAO. Florence, the floor is yours, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Sandro, for inviting me. I was also at the Palermo conference coordinating a group on the sustainable food value chain and agroecology, so I am very happy to be here and to contribute to this follow-up web dialogue. So the question I was asked to is to look at the challenges and solutions in filling the existing gap between food consumption and production in the Mediterranean region. And for that, we could take very different approaches. One approach could be the value chain one, which as an analytical tool has been used for more than 15 years as a way to better understand how agri-food products move and gain value from the farm gate to the table. However, a classical value chain approach only based on economic benefits is not enough to understand how the food provision can deliver diets that are also sustainable and healthy, which is what we are looking for in the Mediterranean region. So then it is necessary to look for other approaches, such as taking a more horizontal network, systemic or territorial approaches to food supply system, which could contribute to conceive new pathways towards sustainable food systems and healthy diets. So by looking both within and across value chain, we can better identify innovations in actual arrangements that are bringing new values, particularly sustainability, we're talking a lot about it, but also culture, solidarity, and other values that are not related directly to economy into the food system. And by refocusing our analytical lens away from specific commodities and towards new form of organization, we can better capture how they might contribute to promoting sustainable consumption and production in local food systems, and in particular in the Mediterranean region. So we are thinking about innovations such as short supply chains, community-supported agriculture, territorial markets, circular economy, gastronomy, agrotourism, it was mentioned by George, geographical indications, or also GIAS, the globally important agriculture heritage systems, which are some examples. We should also emphasize the role and potential of agroecology. as also a territorial approach in both improving sustainable production and also sustainable consumption through innovative markets. So I just would like to highlight one of these a few examples I mentioned, which is geographical indications, or as you know, they refer to products with specific characteristics and qualities and reputation resulting from their geographical origin. So these offer differentiation to product that can be attributed to this local feature, history, or distinctive characteristic linked to natural and human factors, such as soil, climate, local know-how, and traditions. And GIs are in fact already used in most of the countries of the Mediterranean region to give economic value to their product and facilitate market access. But they are also contributing to create jobs, boost local development, and contribute to healthy diets by preserving traditional food products, environment, and biodiversity. So for me, it's important to consider these approaches, and why not to consider them as a priority transformative action for the agenda that we will be discussing now. And to look at this topic, our local food system development in the Mediterranean region can be revisited by taking a more horizontal network, systemic, and territorial approach. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Florence, for your contribution as well. Indeed, there are various approaches to consider the issue at stake. It's a very complex, and we should all discuss and various interlinkages, trade-offs, so that we could come up with a number of particular specific actions, content specific for the Mediterranean, these actions that are needed to fill the gap between sustainable consumption and production. And perhaps we could open the discussion. Thanks for the contribution also to our co-chairs and all participants present, as basically to introduce to the floor the main, I would say, question of how and what does it take? What does it take to, what kind of actions are needed really to fill that gap? How can we push consumption closer to the production so that it could really become one of the locomotives or influencers for the production? Because till now, I believe we all agree that consumption is lagging way behind. So by putting these questions ahead, I would like to open the floor to the discussion and kindly encourage you to take active participation through your contribution, sharing ideas. Again, our ultimate goal of today's e-dialogue is actually to look at the consumption and production as actions which jointly have to contribute towards both of them. Would anyone would like to take action and step in with specific answers, please? Specific ideas. Perhaps our colleagues from CIHEAM-Bari could help if we have already someone, because I cannot see so far. Maybe my interface is not proper to see raised hands.
Barbara, Elliot.
Since we are we're waiting a little bit for participants to start the discussion. I think the situation is quite clear. SCP has a particular role, and it's very well articulated on the global level, on European level with sustainable SCP action plan within the European Union. It's also articulated on the Mediterranean level through SCP action plan, which was adopted back in 2015. And specific actions are actually ongoing already, with production side, I believe, being more in the center of attention rather than the consumption side. Our producers are being assisted by various interventions, including capacity building. There are several large-scale interventions by the European Union. One of them is our SwitchMed, which is considered to be the flagship initiative of the European Commission related to incorporating or to mainstreaming sustainable consumption and production into the four main sectors of economy, including food and agriculture. And with this intervention, action is taking place in the southern Mediterranean and eastern Mediterranean countries, so that to assist them with building national capacity in terms of policy, how to integrate SCP into our national action plans. At the same time, action is being done at the level of building capacities of green entrepreneurs who are tackling our environmental, social, and economic challenges in the regions through entrepreneurial way. So there is a very large green entrepreneurship program taking place all around Mediterranean, southern part and eastern part of the Mediterranean. And the capacity is being built in the countries, and it stays there because it goes, the methodology is through train of trainers, so the capacity remains in the country and evolves then within the national territorial frames. So I truly believe that there are already actions taking in order to mainstream SCP in the Mediterranean food sector. But perhaps we could also continue discussing what else has to be done in order to ensure that SCP, the integration of SCP into the policies and instruments truly helps developing sustainable food system in the Mediterranean. So we kindly encourage our participants to take the floor and contribute to the discussion of what does it take to connect sustainable consumption and production and fill the gap. Yes, please.
May I intervene? Yes, this is Pasquale.
Yes,
Steduto,
yes, Pasquale,
from Cairo. Sorry that the connectivity between production and consumption is much stronger than the connectivity of internet. I lost you a few times. But I wanted, in fact, to look at this, or at least intervene, contribute a little bit in the reflection of this interconnectivity between production and consumption, particularly in terms of sustainability, because there are certain degree of disconnectivity, but there is a strong connectivity there, because where the driver for a sustainable production can be strong through the substances, protein instead of animal protein, the fact that we are looking for more fresh vegetable and fruits, this generate what is a diversity at the production level, which in a way confer resilience to the food production system, which is already an element, a strong element of sustainability. So what I'm trying to say is that we are still lagging behind, let's say, demand. Some
I'm sorry, Pasquale.
Sustainably or unsustainably, there is some degree there of freedom. But what you cannot hear me.
Pasquale, apologies for interrupting you. There were a few interruptions in the connection. I'm not sure if everyone couldn't hear you, but I didn't hear you for a few times. Would it be possible if you could kindly repeat, summarize your idea?
Okay, if you stop, Pasquale, if you stop video, probably we can hear you better.
I think it could help.
Please, Pasquale, try to speak.
Pasquale, could you please, I can see that you are still connected. Maybe you have disconnected your microphone together with the video.
Only stop video, Pasquale, not to click on mute.
Okay, let's try to reconnect with Pasquale in a little while. And till it's happening, shall we please consider other participants' ideas?
Hello, Artur, may I?
Yes, please. Hi, yes.
Hello, everyone. And well, actually, I had a very quick question, more than providing new actions, but a question to the colleagues in Chania, because they were presenting this work on shortening the supply chain for specifically, if I understood well, for the tourism, agritourism activities. So the first question was whether they have been experiencing in this shortening the chain and linking with tourists as consumers, if they have experienced with the certification schemes similar to maybe what Florence was presenting also about the geographical indications, or other possible schemes, including also agroecology, etc., that could have a bigger interest for the tourist community. This is the first question. So what kind of schemes for certification, but also for marketing or for procurement by hotels or etc. There are specific schemes like, I don't know, types of contracts or other. This is the first question, and the second is whether in doing this work and maybe exploring these different possibilities in terms of certifications or types of procurement schemes, whether you have also gone beyond the tourism and created a change in the consumption, maybe at local level or national level, or whether that shortening of supply chains have benefited also or went beyond the tourism to the local and national consumers. These are the questions for the colleagues. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm not quite sure if I understood correctly, but I suppose that the question is whether there are specific schemes initiated by the region or in Greece, generally speaking, in order to shorten the value chain so as the tourists and also the locals would probably buy and prefer to buy the local production rather than the other one. Is that the question? Sorry. Yeah. So so if this is the question actually, unfortunately, first of all, I have to say that one of the key aims of this observatory and the survey and the questionnaires filled in every year for about 10 years now, one of the scope is actually to bridge the gap between tourism and agriculture, and to be more specific, to take some initiatives and facilitate some policies on behalf of the region probably, or local level, so as the producers will be encouraged to sell their products in the local market, and probably in some hotels, and also the tourists will be encouraged to buy local products. In fact, up to now, unfortunately, there are no specific schemes to facilitate and shorten the chain, and so to actually, so as the tourists will be able to and be encouraged to buy food products at the local level. And I'm not very glad to say that I'm not quite sure whether in the big hotels, or actually you can hardly be sure that in the big hotels now in Crete, tourists can find locally produced products like vegetables, for example. But there are a few reasons to explain that. First of all, the production is not enough during the summer, and the cost sometimes is very high, so for them, so it's actually it is strange to say that it's less expensive to buy a product that is produced elsewhere than Crete rather than buy the Cretan product, because the cost of production is higher over here. However, the only scheme that was introduced lately, and I can bring in my mind, is that the olive oil sold now in tavernas and everywhere have to be bottled one rather than a bulk. So the tavernas and hotels have to sell to the to offer to the consumers olive oil that is produced here in Crete, or at least in Greece. So actually, we try to, through a few projects and research projects, and through some initiatives, to encourage the local producers to sell their products in the local market. Also, yeah, and we try now with chestnut. This is also, we have succeeding with aromatic and medicinal plants, and we try now with the chestnut, because chestnut is produced only in the area of Chania and mountainous areas actually. And we try to find a way so to encourage the local farmers to sell their products here in Crete, rather than sell them in supermarkets outside or wholesalers. Also, one of the main outcomes of this survey, this observatory, is that most of the tourists buy olive oil and sometimes herbs, and there is a huge increase in the herbs locally produced in the last 5 years, and most of them buy olive oil, and also they consume something like fruit juice, orange juice, while being here in Crete. And this is, of course, this is good, this is a success, but we still have a long way to go, because definitely we need somehow to educate our farmers to produce high quality products and sell them in the local market rather than try to find wholesalers and then sell them somewhere else in probably sometimes high prices. And also to educate the tour operators and all those people, the consumers first of all, but also all those involved in the tourism sector. So they will be encouraged to buy products and use local products rather than find products coming from abroad or in somewhere else.
You said this dimension as well.
Okay.
Any dimension that will take place.
Also, lately we shall introduce Kaouter.
Kaouter from Morocco
is here with us. She's second year student. She's doing a researcher also. She's doing a master thesis here, and her master thesis introduces a new dimension of the Mediterranean diet, and somehow the impact. The aim of the study is to pinpoint the impact of the Mediterranean diet in the climate change.
Just if you could very briefly, so that very briefly, so we could understand the point of the research you're doing, and move on with the other participants. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No. Please proceed, but just very briefly. Thank you.
We're trying to highlight the environmental footprints of the Mediterranean diet in order to bring it back as a consumption pattern in the Mediterranean area, and to show how adopting the Mediterranean diet as consumers will help mitigate climate change. Right.
Very interesting. So perhaps we could hear also about the results of your study when it's completed, or is it completed already?
No, it's not yet.
Okay, so congratulations with the topic. I think it's a very relevant topic for the region, for the theme we're discussing today. So we'll be more than happy to hear what are the results related to your research. And thank you very much, Eleni and George, for your contribution and for your sharing your experience. Because something that you mentioned is basically related to specific practical implementation, I would say, on the implementation side, practical application of those SCP practices that must or need to be uptaken either by the policymakers, industry, consumers, so that the sustainable consumption and production, that this gap could be filled. You have mentioned voluntary instruments. You mentioned policy. So I think by the end of this discussion, we'll be able to put together in a structured way, if we manage to do so, some specific ideas so that we uptake them for the next step and for the development of the platform, which has to come up with specific actions after all. Thank you very much. Anyone else would like to raise a hand? Yes, Milena, I can see your hand. Please proceed. Thank you.
So, thank you very much for very interesting discussion. And I would like to point the attention on the fact that all the examples that we heard now about local food systems, about territorial development and so on, these are actually examples of the positive impact of agri-food systems toward the achieving of the Sustainable Development Goals. However, there is a problem with this because we actually do not know, we don't have even capacity of understanding how local action on local level is actually contributing to these Sustainable Development Goals. And it's undoubtful. I tend to believe that the Mediterranean diet is a way to bridge consumption and production, but still we don't know how to scale up this local level activities in such a way that they have impact at scale, not just in one region, but on a wider Mediterranean scale, and also contributing to the global agenda for sustainable development. And I think that one problem here is really the way we conceptualize our discourse. And I sent a mail before in response to Elliot, because I don't see why sustainable consumption and sustainable production should be bridged. What should be bridged is consumption and production, I think, because when they're sustainable, they're already bridged, for my feeling. What we are not having like a good understanding is how sustainable diets and sustainable food systems are equivalent between themselves. What I mean by equivalence is not equality. I mean that if a diet is sustainable, then a food system should be sustainable too. And if a food system is sustainable, then automatically also the diet is sustainable. So for my feeling, in order to understand how to assess the impact of local level for their contribution to the sustainability development goals on Mediterranean level or on global level, I think that we really need to understand how to speak about sustainable food systems and sustainable diets in a way that is allowing us to express our goals. That's all.
Okay, Milena, thank you very much for your question and for your comments. Before we continue with the discussion and comments that you proposed, I would like to give the floor to Suzanne, who has to leave in a little while. And before she does so, Suzanne, could you please proceed with whatever you wanted to say, to contribute? Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, and thanks for inviting me to this meeting. I obviously want to bring in the angle of education. A number of the first speakers referred to education, and I think this is an area where, as a team, we have not embraced enough other ministries, such as ministries of education, perhaps. And when I'm talking about education, I'm not only referring to what perhaps comes to mind initially, education of students in schools. Of course, that is key. So again, we are looking here at trying to instill a value amongst our younger generation for appreciating the local, the seasonal, the territorial foods and all the benefits around that, whether it's benefits for them personally from a health perspective, whether it's benefits for the natural environment, whether it's benefits for the local economic system. That is key. And obviously, if you are going to be working with students in schools, you need to have well-trained teachers. So I think a priority is getting teachers who are trained in understanding sustainable consumption and production, obviously with a focus on Mediterranean diet and all the benefits around that. But then also, of course, ministries of education are also concerned with universities and higher education institutions. So it's not only training of teachers who are part of those institutions and universities, but it's also training of all the other professionals. If you're training as a manager, knowing what it means, not only if you're going to be going into food manufacturing and all the angles of sustainable consumption and production there, but also literally if you're just going into management and have nothing to do with food, but you're going to be running a corporation, you're going to be feeding your employees, you're going to be, running a canteen in your factory, so that you procure food which is, in keeping with the Mediterranean diet. If any kind of profession, obviously, if you're looking at MDs, it's integral that they should know what a Mediterranean diet is all about and how, when eventually they do graduate and they are actually dealing with patients, that a proper diet, obviously according to what the needs are of their patients, is key, and Mediterranean diet can have a strong role there. I guess what I'm trying to say is that education is in schools, is in higher education institutions, but then there's also education, as was referred to, of the general public. And there again, coming back to the ministries of education around, you know, the Mediterranean and many other countries, the ministries are very concerned with lifelong education. It's a big agenda right now. Lifelong education, obviously also related to the fact that you have people moving from one place of employment to another. You have an aging society where you have people 60 years and older who have another 30 years of life, where they can contribute to the economy or where they can contribute to the well-being of society. So if we can also work with such ministries and such entities so that we have lifelong education, which is suited to adults at the different stages of their life. If you're working with young parents or parents of, let's say, young children, you can reach them through mass media, you can reach them through their place of work, helping them to understand how to bring Mediterranean diet to their children. Okay? If you're working with elderly people, helping them to actually be proud of the knowledge they have already about the benefits of Mediterranean diet and how to actually consume a Mediterranean diet, and using them as educators of younger generations. We can also have elderly people actually being entrepreneurs themselves. This was mentioned. Why not? We have an issue where some of the elderly people are low income. So if we could help them to gain some entrepreneurial skills or partner with younger people and join forces to produce foods, they have the knowledge and the skills as elderly people, and the young people will bring in the entrepreneurial acumen, they will bring in the marketing acumen, and obviously maybe a little bit more energy in some cases as well. Then these are all things where, again, education can help to, from a consumption perspective, have a strong role. Another thing I wanted to mention, again, education is with regards to policymakers, and also policymakers as leaders, if you want to say that, of the civil service, in the sense that you have all this procurement which takes place with regards to hospitals, orphanages, schools, even just general office buildings of government, civil service. Look at all the food that is consumed in meetings, in events, etc. If policies could be put in place there, that a certain percentage of that food has to be local, has to be seasonal, has to actually portray traditional recipes, etc. So all of these things can actually help to bridge this consumption production role. And I want to end up, sorry, I'm hurrying because I'm a bit conscious of the time and I don't want to take more than the minutes we were allocated as well. I think another key thing is then in the message itself. So what messages should we use to reach, for example, consumers? Often, I'm partly to blame for this, of course. We talk about a Mediterranean diet and looking at it from the food group's perspective, where with regards to, we need to find the triggers to help people take action. And triggers might not be, the cereal, group, or the meat group, or the dairy group, but it would be more things which people are giving value to. How can I eat a healthy Mediterranean diet and cook that in a short time? How can I buy the Mediterranean diet which is accessible to me economically? How can I, for example, buy a Mediterranean diet, consume a Mediterranean diet, which I'm guaranteed has no artificial pesticides? We need to find the triggers which people are giving value to in how we couch, how we coin our messages, so that the people are more motivated to choose the Mediterranean diet. And perhaps we've been going around this a little bit the wrong way. But at the end of the day, I feel that at different stages of life, whether it's the young children who are very keen on protecting the environment, for example, the young people who are very keen maybe to earn some money and have a livelihood, the adults who've just had children and want the well-being of their children at heart, you know, whether it's the elderly who want to give back to society because they still feel they can give back to society. It's just finding the right triggers in order to motivate them to be able to consume a Mediterranean diet. Thanks for giving me this platform.
Thank you, Suzanne, very, very much for your intervention and sharing with us your ideas. I can't say enough how much I share your vision and your ideas. I think education is the key to bring sustainability dimension of consumption closer to the production, so that it truly could influence the production side. And of course, such topics as public procurement is extremely important, and it should play a proper role. And there are already interesting initiatives taking place around the Mediterranean, where public procurement is used as an instrument in order to make consumption more sustainable. I would thank you again very much, Pasquale. I think
I'm sorry, but I have to leave for another meeting. They've already called me. So
thank you very much again. Thank you. Pasquale, I think you're back, and I can see your hand. Please.
I'll give a second try. Otherwise, if it fails again, I will send my comments in writing to Sandro in case something happened. But I would like to share with all of you. In fact, what I was referring is what also you just mentioned, the strong driver that the consumption and so the diets would have on the sustainability of production. In this part of the world, Egypt, North Africa, there is the nutritional dimension that is also another leverage, strong leverage. And like before has been said, education, and we fully agree with that awareness building, educational part, and the Ministry of Education as well. There is also the Ministry of Health that plays an important role. For instance, here in Egypt, we have the problem of obesity. 30% of the population is obese. So the strong demand for a healthy lifestyle, healthy diets is there. It represents a leverage for inducing a certain type of diets, which are plant-based, like I was saying before, protein that derive from plant, from pulses, rather than meat only, the fresh vegetables and fruits. These are all part of a healthy diet that indirectly set the scene for a diverse production, which represented the base for resilience. And resilience is already one strong component of sustainable production. So there is not only the awareness building, the school programs, the education, but there is also incentives that have from the healthy side that have a strong influence and with a strong benefit economically as well. So they can deviate.
Pasquale, I think we have as much as we would like, to see your image. We love that. Perhaps you could switch off the camera.
So this interconnectivity is very strong. In any case, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't know if you hear me now.
Yeah, much better.
Okay, so I was just mentioning the two-track approach for this interconnectivity between production and consumption. So on the consumption side, I already mentioned also this aspect of the healthy diet for good nutrition. On the other side, the agroecology incentive, because in this part of the world we have also the other challenges beyond the nutrition, which are the natural resources, the demographic urbanization, and the climate change. So that incentives on both sides will provide, let's say, a more connectivity between sustainable production and sustainable consumption. I will stop here. Eventually, I will provide some written note to Sandro for further, incorporation of comments. I'll stop here. Thanks. I hope you heard me.
Yes, Pasquale, we heard everything that you said, and thank you very much for your intervention and sharing your ideas and perspectives also from Egypt, which suffers from other problems as obesity as a result of the letting go the Mediterranean diet. I think it's utilizing more less nutrition food. Thanks again. I would like to pass the floor to other participants who would like to share their opinion. Yes, please, I can see from FAO meeting room.
Oh, hi, good afternoon. This is Jorge Fonseca. I was encouraged by my colleagues to say something about the need to look for more robust evidence on what do we mean with freshness, and especially freshness, because if we are here talking about the short supply chains, also about linking small farmers with urban dwellers, the message, even through education, the message doesn't necessarily come through if there is not something beyond just the fact that it has better flavor. At one point, I presented this idea in the ICIHEAM European, it's an NGO, it's probably the largest organization of food technologists and food molecular biologists, and they raised the issue that we don't have enough information on what is it that we're losing by having perishable food for 3 or 4 weeks in cold chains, as opposed to having it fresh within 2 or 3 days in your table. This seems to me a particular opportunity for the Mediterranean diet that can be used, for example, as an example for other regions. Likewise, is how important, but I think on that one, what I'm going to say, we have more data, so is the diversification of the different components of the diet. If it is not one, if we're talking about grains, how important is to have 6 to 7 grains within a week as opposed to only 2? Do we have enough data for that? It's my question. Is what I'm actually putting here. Maybe linking to other disciplines here in the region that can actually say something like, within 2 or 3 days, we are actually having some aromatic compounds that are not just good for the flavor, but also for the mechanisms inside of our body. This is even a stronger point when it comes to education. Yeah.
If I may insert?
Yes, please, Sandro, of course.
I would like to connect with what Pasquale Steduto said before and what Jorge said now in reference to the interconnection between the challenges. For example, when Pasquale raised the issue of obesity, and Pasquale, for who does not know, is one of the leading experts on water scarcity. When it was some months ago, at the time it was the DG Graziano de Silva in Cairo, he raised the issue how obesity was strongly connected with water scarcity, by not giving the condition to produce the fresh food that just Jorge was mentioning, and create some trade of a food imported in Cairo and a very low nutritional value. That is one of the main part of our approach that we start in Palermo, was to start to see how different challenges that normally are managed separately in silos, in this case, it cannot be anymore considered separate. Like For example, by bringing water, and I connected with Giuseppe Provenzano with what we did when we started to think in terms of migration. When we started this web dialogue by using the session 7 that was related to water scarcity, land degradation, and climate change. How this was influencing the fact that, you know, the issue of rural migration in the big city. Jorge Fonseca with the facilitator with Florence Tartanac of the session 3 on the urban food system and the urban food policy part. So I'm saying, let's try now, because it's already 2:30, if we are able to see also the interconnection among the challenges and which way we can coping with this challenge. As we know, just Jose highlighted the point, is the lack of data. That what we are going to achieve when we will go in action with the multi-stakeholder called the platform is a platform for dialogue, but more on action. This action means that they should have impact by scaling up a very outstanding project to be scaling up within a sustainable food system approach, context specific for the Mediterranean, the regional, country, or territorial or site level. But this how it can possibly be done if we don't have enough data and indicators to assess the impact. This I put it just on the floor to see how we can connect rural migration, you know, that is capacity building, with urban, the fresh food, the water scarcity, the obesity, and the approach that we felt that could come from experience, like Florence Tartanac said, 15 years is analytical tool. Which are the analytical tools? Which are the approach that we can identify to start to fill this gap? Because if not, we know how the challenge is to modify, to influence the consumption, to modify the production. I said, let's try to see if it makes sense to say, when it was made this statement that the obesity in Cairo, it is related to the food import, you know, which are the scientific evidence? Because we needed to ground on something on which we can build then our assessment to accelerate the SDG in the Mediterranean region context specific. Thanks.
Thank you, Sandro. Thank you, Sandro, for putting up this question. If participants would like to share any ideas, please.
Excuse me.
Yes.
If you could just switch the video so we can see the speaker, because we can. I think the facilitator needs to do. I suppose I think that also the others have the same problem as we.
I cannot do that because I'm not based in the premises of CIHEAM. I would kindly ask our colleagues from CIHEAM to, if it's possible, to automatically switch the video translation to the person who is speaking. Luigi, is it possible to do so?
To do what? To
switch video signal to the person who is speaking rather than
the video. She want to show something?
No. It was a technical point of if possible to provide settings to the system so that whoever is speaking, his or her face is shown. Is shown, sorry, on the main screen. But if it's not doable, let's just go ahead because we don't have much time left. It's only 25 minutes till we close the discussion. Just to make, perhaps to summarize what Sandro was suggesting, unless
video.
Yeah. Sandro, I think it's a very good point that you have raised, that we have to come up with something with specific actions which show the interconnectivity. But in order to do so, I guess we could look at the food supply chain from one side which includes, of course, procurement and use, and also end-of-life management. Because we also have to take this into consideration, because the amount of waste which is being generated by the food industry is enormous. All the plastic and food actually wasted along the way has become one of the main issues. This could be considered as, from one hand side, and what kind of instruments and policies or interventions could be suggested in order to, if we look into the food supply chain, and such instruments as communication instruments, economic instruments, voluntary instruments that have been mentioned, apart from regulatory policy instruments. So I think if we consider our possible actions in this perspective, I think we might come up with specific actions that would form those packages. Thank you. Does anyone would like to share opinion?
Yeah, if Artur, can I don't know if you hear me.
Yes, I can hear you very well. I think we all do.
Okay. No, just to say that in order, because the connectivity are several, the challenges to be that are interconnected are several. I think there is a need for having at least a framework of, let's say, a sort of model of this connectivity, so that it started to take shape and be quantified. Because like also Sandro were saying, we don't have another also other speaker, we don't have all the information or all the data. This doesn't mean we don't have to take action, but it means also that if we want to address this connectivity in a broad sense, in a comprehensive way, we needed to have a model, we needed to have a sort of framework that, let's say, structure the connectivity. A little bit like the water, food, energy nexus. After the conceptualization of these three, there has been a lot of development in terms of actual quantification through framework and analytical tools. So probably we don't have still the tools, not only the data. So there should be some reflection if some part of this white paper that is going to be produced will address eventually also this framework of connectivity that Sandro was addressing. Over.
Right. Well, thank you very much. I think the conceptual framework is being developed while we are evolving with our discussions, and of course, it includes the drivers from one hand side, which are then divided in economic, political, socio-cultural, environmental drivers from one hand side, which influence the production, the whole food chain from the extraction of resources to production to consumption, use, and disposal. And it does influence all these stages. It interferes, of course, they interfere with the food environment and food consumption, consumers' behavior, while producing outputs. And I think Elliot has sent today early, prior to the meeting, his article, which is based on the high panel of experts diagram, which was produced, I think, several years ago. Elliot, would you like also to comment on what Pasquale has mentioned in this regard?
Yes, indeed. But I've been following quite carefully the discussion, but I think there is a missing player if we're talking about food production and consumption, and we haven't put on the table And I just wanted to make the point, we haven't discussed the food industry. And the food industry, which is part of the problem, also has to be part of the solution. And the fact that we're all talking very well, and I sent you the article, not that I wanted to do just the article, but just to look at the drivers and the outcomes. You see, that's just one point, and then tying it up with the diagram that was sent, looking at the gap, which is a very good way of showing it. But we must, in some way, we're talking about what people eat, so they can either eat fresh fruit and farmers markets, and that's all very nice, and it's got to be sustainable, but somewhere the food industry has to come into our discussions.
That's most certain, of course. The food industry is the biggest player and the rule keeper so far, and the rule giver. The industry will always comply with the minimum standards and minimum because, well, it doesn't make economic sense unless the CEOs of the food industry are very cautious.
We've got to work with them, and if they sell more because it's more healthy and more sustainable, then that's what they're interested in. I agree, they're not primarily interested in the public health, but they're interested in profit. And if we can marry the two aims, then it's a win-win situation. And we've got to work with them. I'm sorry to say, that's what we've got to do. And whether it is, I mean, just take an example from the European area, we're looking at food fortification, whether it's iodine in salt or B vitamins and folic acid in flour. There's no consistent policy. And we all have to be involved in that, because we're not just talking about the people who can afford, we're talking about getting to the people who are food insecure. And that's right also in the center of the diagram. We have to consider food security as well. So it is complex. We've got lots of ideas here. And the question is how to fit the pieces of this puzzle together so that everybody can benefit.
Indeed. And Ellen, if I may ask, what is your vision in terms of empowering the production, the food industry, industry itself?
Yeah. Yes.
How to better engage them so that to create that win-win situation?
Okay, so there's two ways of carrots and sticks. The sticks is from legislation, such as maybe a sin tax that to encourage food labeling properly, and you can use traffic lights or ticks or whatever you have. You have to forbid junk food advertising to kids. Okay, so that's, and from the bottom up, then to work with them to produce more healthy foods with less salt, less sugar, less pesticides, less trans fats, which we've managed to make the ingredients more healthy. And I'm sure they will be interested, but they've got to be in. And it's noticeable that in all our discussions, we don't have too many people from the food industry, and they have to be engaged. So that's a challenge for everybody.
Indeed, thank you very much, Elliot. We will try to do so for our next meeting, which will should take place by the end of the month. We will announce that separately. Thank you for your ideas, and I think it's a very, very important action to take to engage food industry. I can see a raised hand from the FAO meeting room, please.
In reference to move forward in the engagement of this multi-stakeholder platform, as you know, the voluntary guideline is a tool to engage public and private sector moving in a voluntary guideline. As a CIHEAM and the FAO, in 2017, under the same umbrella of the One Planet, United Nations platform, we started to draft the voluntary guideline for the sustainability of the Mediterranean diet in the Mediterranean region. So, because already we spent some years to work on the draft, and we have a draft that never it was implemented. It was in some way it stayed on the 2017. This draft of the voluntary guideline to improve the sustainability of the Mediterranean diet in the Mediterranean region was supposed to be circulated for online online consultation, a broader online participatory consultation that never it was advanced by FAO and CIHEAM as well. I believe that in this context, because of this collaborative effort after Palermo, there are all the conditions for CIHEAM with all the 4 institutes, as well as FAO that now has a broader coalition of also technical division inside FAO, together with so many international organizations such as the Union for the Mediterranean, to move forward, to proceed to better understand, to use the tool of the voluntary guideline. That I believe can be a practical way to move forward to have an active involvement of the private sector. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed, Sandro, for your words and for your intervention. Indeed, voluntary instruments could play a role in solving the problem we are discussing today. But I also believe that unless we move ahead with bold action and bold requirements from in terms of changing procurement, for example, public procurement rules, which, if implemented, will definitely affect the industry itself, because industry want to sell. And if there are serious public procurement rules which imply procurement of sustainable food products, then our industry will follow and everybody will follow. Procurement is one of the most important instruments, I believe, in terms of moving this agenda forward. I think we have discussed in some depth very important points which were in our agenda for today. Let me please ask if anyone has anything else to add before we move to closing the event, giving the floor to co-chairs for their final notes. The FAO meeting room has still a raised hand. Is it the previous one or the current one? I mean, the new one.
Okay. Yeah, I have to go because I have another meeting at 3, so maybe I will start with my remarks.
Yes, please, of course.
Yeah, because the end was for previous intervention.
I see.
Nobody wants to speak in the room. Yeah, so thank you very much for the opportunity. And as I say, I see several topics that are related. Was the one that I presented about territorial approaches and short supply chain. I see there is an interest in it, especially from Greece. But we have to look also at, let's say, the more mainstream sector, and how we can influence this mainstream sector, especially the private sector. So we could also maybe have a working package about this topic. Look also at education. I think the education topic is very important. The intervention made by Suzanne was very interesting. And when we are talking about education, we are not talking about only children, but as she said, a lot of professionals are involved in food by one way or the other, in procurement, whatever. So we really need to go also for this topic. So it could be another topic that we could add. And then the resources, natural resources could be another one maybe. So just trying to see what are the different points that were discussed, during the meeting and see if we can already maybe pre-identify some of the topic that we could work on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. I would like to ask, or yes, our other co-chairs, if they would like to provide their final notes to the discussion, please. Giuseppe, are you still with us?
Yes, can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly well.
Okay, perfect. First of all, thank you very much. I think it's been a very fruitful session. Since many colleagues have actually mentioned the topic of education, something very close to our interest at UfM, I would like maybe to just mention for raising your visibility on existing frameworks in the Mediterranean, that we are working very closely together with the UNEP on a dialogue which is called Education for Sustainable Development. More specifically, we are talking about the action plan for the Mediterranean strategy of education for sustainable development. So we work very closely on the regional dimension of these very important dialogues, where we are seeing since many years that there is an interest from our member states, more specifically both the ministries of education from one side and the ministries of environment on the other. And in this framework, we have seen that the countries have been proposing many best practices and good actions that go, as you mentioned, could be from the procurement through taking pupils maybe to the countryside specific centers for trainings, to even in some countries they take it from the approach to human rights. So it's a very flexible instrument, and of course there is a very strong aspect related to sustainable consumption and production from one side, and also everything related to the green and the blue economies to the other. So this could be also something which could be thought as synergy depending on the outcomes on the platform. And finally, just allow me to conclude in raising that, as Sandro very well mentioned, we need to think about the outcomes of this platform from the actionable point of view. What could be work packages, could be actions for the future. And I think it would be it would be much easier to work, especially from the point of view of trainings, of new skills, of research projects, because this will help in making the Mediterranean more sustainable from one side, closing this gap that we have identified as existing, but at the same time will provide job opportunities and research experience to the Mediterranean youth, which should be one of our priorities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Giuseppe, indeed, for summarizing the UfM social perspective and your work perspective related to deep-root migration and education, research, and innovation, which is extremely important, of course, in order to boost the sustainable territorial development, without which I think that we might lose our bright minds migrating for larger cities, and the countryside will stay with very little human resources, together with existing environmental problems, which is a no win-win situation at all. So if we tackle these issues in a proper way, I think we may achieve may find considerable solutions. Thank you very much indeed. Roberto, would you like, please, to summarize your ideas, your perspectives after this discussion?
And sorry, but Roberto apologized, but he left the meeting because a very important commitment. So I think that he addressed best regards to all of you, but it is not now here. So please, if Sandro wants to close this session, I think that should be better that Sandro. I profit of this occasion to excuse me if I didn't understand your question before. If you want to look automatically the speaker, you have to click on the upper part of the screen on the left. You can see that speaker view. If you click there, you can automatically see the speaker. Okay? Try to click, and you automatically can see the speaker. Anyway, please, Sandro, up to you the conclusion, or to Artur, because Roberto is not here.
Sorry, Luigi, there is a George.
Yes, Luigi, thank you. Oh, Sandro, sorry. Thank you very much, Luigi, for specifically for sharing the solution to the technical problem that we faced. Before we go to Sandro, George, would you like, please, to provide your final notes, please?
So, sorry. So, this is Eleni, not George.
Yes, Eleni, please.
Okay, indeed. So, there are many different topics and issues arise through this discussion, and thanks for the opportunity, actually, to take part in all these interesting topics. I think that in any case, there are issues that are very challenging to the local societies, but also from a policy side of view. As far as, we actually, somehow discussed the topic of how to connect the producers and consumers and try to bring together the producers with the tourism sector somehow. So this is actually our main key topic of this issue, key contribution, I would say. But of course, there is always the discussion. There's always an issue if we consider production, bringing consumption and production, how you can educate the local consumers and the consumers actually to pay the premium price for the local product, which most of the cases are more expensive. So education and capacity building and training both producers and consumers is a key issue here. I think that in any case, this is a very interesting challenge and initiative, and the gap between sustainable consumption and production. I think if we are to moving ahead, we need to find the key issues and concentrate on them and focus on them, and probably find some initiatives that we can probably programs in the EU or some other initiatives that we could contribute in and take advantage of them at the policy level or probably in the EU programs.
Yeah, if I may say.
Yes, sure.
Second, Artur, if I may say that we all know that the major economic force in the Mediterranean area is the tourism sector in our days. So I think there are ways that we can use the IT tools, GI systems, and so on, where we can combine Mediterranean diet, sustainable production, and sustainable consumption as well. But there's a lot of field for further work, discussion, collaboration, and a lot of space to move on. Thank you very much, and congratulations.
Thank you very much indeed, George and Eleni, for your contributions, for being today with us. I think that your examples on the ground show advancement on several interconnections, as you say, how to move sustainable production to bring it closer to consumption, and how to educate consumers. it's a big issue. Of course, there is a considerable gap between the attitudes of consumers, because we all want to contribute to buy sustainable products, but something really missing in when it comes to actual buying the products, and how to close also this gap between the attitude of consumers and their actual buying preferences is another topic. Also, there is a need, I believe, for a lot of research, and even research into from the point of view of how coordination of the food chain players, because the sustainability issues must come from within the whole system, and it is absolutely interconnected. So there is a lot of activities to be done, and what you said, Eleni, in terms of identifying our specific areas and then developing packages of actions in order to tackle those issues, which will be identified at the end of the day and considered by the white paper or discussion paper as it evolves, is something ongoing. So thank you very much once again. Sandro, before we close the event, would you like to say a word?
Thanks very much. I think that we will have some minutes of this third web dialogue shortly be prepared and to circulate it to all of you, to have your comment to be finalized, as well as the recorded video of all this session. Thanks very much, and looking for the continuation of our collaborative effort. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a nice afternoon, and see you next time.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Kind regards.